Before I begin, I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which I live, the Gumbaynggirr people, and recognise their continuing connection to the land, water, community and culture. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I wish to extend a warning to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, as the following presentation may contain images and names of deceased persons. For 24 years, I have lived and grown on this land in the Nambucca Valley, where I spent most of these years unintentionally blind to the original owners of this place I called home, the Gumbaynggirr people, where the rivers and beaches that I was raised on were staple to their lifestyle, source of food, connection to country, and identity. Despite being one of the oldest cultures in the world, their presence isn't seen, where the effects of colonisation echoes through the lack of their existence within my immediate surroundings. Growing up here, I hadn't considered the ongoing effects of colonisation that are shown to me on a daily. Buildings, houses, roads, white faces and the English language. Despite the invasion occurring in 1788, the injustices and effects of colonisation are still heavily present, yet they're still told to move on and to get over it. Where I live is known for the murder of 3 Indigenous children. Whilst the presence of First Nations people and culture is immediately visible, I drive by this sign daily. Yes, it does recognise the presence of the Gumbaynggirr people, but it highlights the grim, often untold history as this sign is placed on the land where one of those 3 bodies were found. The history of systematic disadvantage echoes at this site, as still to this day, the families of these children have still not achieved justice. The Gumbaynggirr people are still not experiencing the equity and social justice that many non-Indigenous Australians take for granted. Contemporary injustices, alongside my own ignorance, are products of a post-colonial society that disadvantages some whilst prospering others. I haven't always noticed the lack of visibility and valuing of First Nations people. Being born white allowed me to prosper, and this privilege bred ignorance. Society hid the truth and the grim history of First Nations people and glorified colonialism, as this perspective supported the dominant culture. I found local schools displaying Indigenous art, which weren't present when I was attending. This prompted me to assume a revaluing of culture in the curriculum. Conversations with local teachers confirmed this, yet also highlighted how knowledge taught was more generalised and not specific to the Gumbaynggirr nation. Although these lessons are increasing, they are failing to recognise the diversity and individuality of Indigenous nations. They are also being taught by predominantly non-Indigenous teachers, thus hindering their right to self-determination, as their own history and perspectives are still being taught by the dominant Western culture. Indigenous art covers the poles through the main street in Nambucca Heads. Various signs at beaches and walking trails highlighted what little I knew about the history of the Gumbaynggirr people. This led me to explore the local history section at the library. Stewart Island to me was the home of a golf course and swimming spots. However, unbeknownst to me, it was where the First Nations people were forced to live, until they were forced off the island to make way for the white man's playground, the golf course, which was built upon cemeteries. This land consists of a grim history that is full of dispossession and the ignorance of truth. Why am I only now learning the truths of a place I call home? Being raised by non-Indigenous parents and being taught a version of history at school that celebrated colonialism instead of exposing its grim truth, I was and am unfortunately a product of this unjust time. Society has turned a blind eye to the truth to support and uphold the white dominant culture, but it's time to open our eyes.